How's it going? So, Malachi, or any other person watching this video, you're interested in Clip Studio Paint. Well, obviously, you need to look around. Maybe you try it for yourself, or you could watch this video and see what I do and what I explore. So, first off, my layout is made for how I draw, but of course, there's a bunch of different windows that you can incorporate into your version. Uh, Go to Window in the corner right here, and there's different workspaces that you can do. Register your workspace, managing your workspaces. You can even download workspaces from Clip Studio Assets Store. I would say that try to find the one that you want exactly, and then make sure you save it. I always do it when I get new brushes. I always just save over my workspace, even though it's the same setup, just in case. And if you want to save new brushes that you've imported, you need to close it correctly by actually hitting Quit Studio Paint. If you hit the X in the corner, that is not closing it correctly, and it will not save what you've done. Make sure you do. Okay, so let's go over some of the basics that you can see right here. So we have File, right? You can open files. You can create a new file. You can save your presets. I saved a bunch that are at the print sizes that we work at. You can make a webtoon. You can make a comic regular, a printing for a fanzine. You can do comic settings, and you can do animations, but we're just going to be covering illustrations in this. I would recommend exploring the stuff that is in the other sections if you are planning to use them. I know Clip Studio Paint has a very good section on their websites for learning how to use the program. So next, you have your file open. So let's go over some of the stuff you can export. You can export as Photoshop files, and you can import Photoshop files, which is very useful. I've never used TIFF or Targa or BMP files, but normal JPEG, PNG should be fine. You can export with different qualities, different sizing stuff. This is new in the newer version. They added direct PDF exports, which is really great because now I don't have to put things into Adobe Acrobat, which is a pain because it will keep logging you out sometimes, or it might just be me. You can do animations. Right now, there is no timeline to export, but if you were making an animation, it works very well. Video is actually fairly quick, even if it's a higher quality scene, like even at like 1080p. You can also export animated GIFs as well that are great for like something like Twitter. And of course, there's Webtoons. I don't have a Webtoons account. I don't use Webtoons, but I get the gist of it. It's a infinitely scrolling comic, so it shouldn't be that hard to get your head around if you follow directions and listen to like the proper way to do things. Time lapse, new feature in the current Clip Studio. I really enjoy it because you can export everything that you've done and it can make it in a square format or regular format. It can be longer. It's based off the amount of brush strokes that you do. So uh, test it out, see how it goes. You know. All right. So keep going. We have import. You can import a lot. You can actually. I usually just import images, but you can do patterns, objects, movies, which sounds like you can do like direct tracing over like a file, basically, if you were doing like animation and you wanted to make it more one-to-one. I know you can do it the hard way too, like I did, where I screenshotted every keyframe and imported it and then drew over that in my own way. But yeah, I feel like it'd be easier to do it this way if you were wanting to just have an artistic expression of sorts on it. 3D data, vectors. Vectors is a big thing on here too. It does support vector artwork, and it's really good for people who use line-based works. So if you're really an artist who's about clean lines, thick lines, uh, flat color pieces, I'd say it's probably pretty good. There's a scan thing in here. I bet it would work with a printer of sorts. I have a printer, but I've never actually tested to see if this would work. It's not really that important though, for what this video is about. Batch process. I never had to use it, but I don't think it's really bad, I would say. It'd probably be for exporting maybe stuff related to like videos, probably. I don't know. I'd have to look into it. Print settings. This print settings and print. That's for your printer. That's pretty good, I would say. Having a printer, yeah. You don't. So you can technically just print from inside the app, which is really good. But it's also good to just go to something like a cloud print service or like what we use at the school, just because, you can print larger. Because, I mean, for me, all I have is an 8x11 printer. And it's better at scanning things, but printing is going to be small. And then you have to pay for ink. Nobody wants to pay for ink. I don't even think the school wants to pay for ink, so yeah. These preferences, command bar, shortcuts, modifier keys, these are definitely things that you want to look into based off your program choice. You can also change your performance, how the interface looks. I'm using a darker color in the medium setting, but you can make it light, you can make it gray. You can't make it colored yet. I wonder, maybe it could be something in the future they think about, but I don't know if that's something that they want people to be able to do. You can change stuff related to the cursors. I'm gonna be honest, I don't touch this stuff, because the setup is pretty good already. But if you're thinking about making it look a different way to make it stand out, I mean, this could be a good thing to look into. Layers and frames, you can change how it expands out. Basically, you have either copy or you can do two. So it would be like name of the layer, and it's a copy, and then there's name of the layer 2, and then it would, if you copied this one again, it'd be copy the layer 2. So I don't know. It's just kind of a whatever you think kind of thing. Light table. I haven't had to use light table. It's probably an animation thing, or I don't know. There's some things with this app that I didn't touch with just because it's not what I've been using it for. I've been mainly using it for painting, so definitely things to look into. Ooh, camera. Camera is good because I think this has to do with animation and/or 3D models, which 3D models are a pretty cool thing to use in this. Ruler unit. Um, You do millimeters or pixels, hex units or points or hues. You can also change all the colors of your margins and snaps and all that, which is pretty cool. Canvas. It just displays a good setting. Don't mess with your display resolution. This is made for your screen of your computer. You can mess with it, but you have an ability in the view section to view it at print size. Don't mess with this, because this keeps it accurate to what you're working with. So the rulers on the inside of the program here, they're always accurate. Let's see. Oh, I wanted to make sure. I'm wondering, do I have my cursor active? Okay, I do. Okay, I was worried about that because I wasn't sure if it was breaking it or not. Color conversion. I haven't messed with it yet. It's so Cmyk and RGB. You could set these to specific ways. Definitely look into it if you're printing, somewhere here. Because I mean, I bet the Japan color settings are good for Cmyk for Japan, but I don't. They're actually good for the US. There's a good amount of them in here. Definitely need to know what you want to use it for. So, again, that's something that you have to kind of figure out on your own. Edit text. Ooh. Yeah, so basically, anytime you put down text, it will put it on a new layer. You can add it to current layers, or you can have it show up in something else. Always create new layer, always add to current layer. Line break, show the line break, double line space. Pretty useful. I don't really touch any of these settings except for the performance because I wanted the computer to be able to use more. That's pretty much everything you need to know in that section because this is all this. All of this has to do with your pen, your tablet, other features that exist that are for the physical thing that you use to draw with. I just have my Cintiq, so I don't really touch them. I'm also not a shortcut person, but guess what? They show you commands on your keys, so yeah, you should always know what key it is to do a certain thing. That's pretty cool. So let's continue. Undo, redo, cut, copy. When you copy a vector, like you can do it as an SVG. Don't really copy vectors that much, so that's the thing. You can delete. You can delete outside of selection. Smart smoothing. That's an interesting one. That's actually you kind of have to have a good graphics card for it, but it can help with making images look less crappy. If you're looking to make an image more better, though, I would probably look into AI upscaling if it's like an old painting or a photo, because they're kind of more better for that. But if you want to make something just a bit smoother in here, it has different levels from weak to strong, and so you don't necessarily need it, but it's there. Um, Removing tones, so you can basically get rid of parts of an image that you want. Pretty cool. There's fill, advanced fill, colorize. Colorize is a feature that I've only seen on Clip Studio, but basically, if you have a line work, and I don't know if you put the color on the same layer or if you put it on a layer below, and then you set a reference as the line art, but basically it kind of guesses where you want the color to go or where it thinks it should go. It's cool, but it's also experimental. It's definitely something that if you want, I'd say it's pretty good for watercolor. If you want to make it look like some like watercolor, put like paper texture on top of it, probably would look pretty good. But if you're talking about like painting or in a like a normal way, I'd probably just stick to actually coloring it yourself. And there's other tools that you can download that will make it easier for different things related to tools. Let's say convert brightness to opacity. That's pretty cool. Black will be solid. White will be transparent. So whatever you're using, if you want the other value to show, you might need to invert it first and then switch it back. This is convert brightness to opacity is pretty good for sketching actually, because it doesn't get rid of anything. It doesn't harm the quality of your work. So if you just want to white pencils over something and then use convert brightness to opacity, it works like an eraser. It's pretty good. It's a bit quicker than having to always pull out the eraser, and it also lets you incorporate more of your style, I would say. Register material. This is related to assets. You can register materials such as like patterns, images, brushes, brush sets, gradient maps, which I will get to, and some other stuff. Tonal correction. This is basically all of the Photoshop layers in its Photoshop kind of settings, its own little section. Brightness and contrast. Hue, saturation, and luminosity. Posterization. Reverse gradient, which reverse gradient basically is invert. So if you want to invert something, just do reverse gradient. Level corrections, tone curve. This is like the square graph with the line, and you can mess with it to get your right curve. Color balance, binarization, and the gradient map. But gradient maps are better if you do them through the layer section, so I'll save that for a bit later and kind of show off some how the app performs. Transform. This is really nice. They have all of the transform stuff, including mesh transformations. And if you look on the bar here, I always have it set so that you can access these commands from the sidebar. I think it's really good because I can just come over here and click any of the things that I need. A lot easier, I would say. Image resolution, change canvas size. That's pretty simple. Changing the image resolution. That's like your DPI. You can also display things as inches or measurements. Like I have it set to 11 by 17. It could be set to pixels, and it would still be the same thing, but like I want to see it in inches, and that makes it a little bit more accurate. Change canvas size, pretty simple. Rotate, flip. Canvas properties. You can clear your history of the. If I remember correctly, this has to do with your brush and like anything you've done to the canvas. You can clear it so that you aren't saving up a bunch of undos or redos. And I would say that if you want to make it easier to do things without messing with the drawing, this is pretty good. It's your Navigator window. On Navigator window, you can zoom in, zoom out, you can, and it has all of the settings here. Fit to Navigator, you do fit to screen. You can rotate it, and this is all just visual on the canvas. It's pretty good. And then these two, flip horizontal, flip vertical. Either way, you're not messing with the app. You're not really messing with the drawing, but it's letting you see things like if the drawing looks wrong, perspective-wise. The dreaded flipping the page, and then you find out, oh my god, the face looks weird. So usually a little bit of like mesh warp or free transform. It usually fixes it for me. Alright, story that's related to comics. Not going to be covering it, but it's fairly simple. Adding pages, new pages, opening pages. It shows it in here, I'm pretty sure as well. So I'd say it's similar probably to InDesign in a way, if you know how to use that. Animation, again, not going to be covering it, but it's a similar thing. You can add tracks, playback settings. You can set your frame rate. I'm on EX, which is the full version. If you get Pro, your animation limit is about 24 frames, I would say. So not a lot. But the good thing about Clip Studio Paint is that it's not like Adobe. You buy it one time, the Pro or the EX, and you get a discount from Pro to EX. You just have to pay for it once. But you get access to all of the stuff, including further updates, which is really nice. You also can use it like Photoshop, where you can have a plan for it. It's much cheaper, very much cheaper than Photoshop or any of the Adobe suite. I would recommend it if you really don't want to use Photoshop after you're done in school, or you want to use something that's pretty professional. It's not gonna be like the best with photo manipulation because it's not made for photo manipulation. But if you're an artist and you're using it to draw, I would probably think that this is better because you're drawing. You don't want to use a photo manipulation app that's bloated, at least to me. I don't think it works that well on computers because it's very much made for photo manipulation and not art. So, highly recommend getting Clip Studio Paint because it's a lot cheaper. You can use it for much longer. It also has a mobile app as well. That's a good thing too. I haven't really done it on my phone because I don't have a stylus on my phone, but it'd probably be pretty close, I would say. And they have a cloud-based system as well if you're wanting to do stuff like that. Okay, so going on, layers. And I will go into this when I go do drawing, but you can do your correction layers in here, which is very interesting because you can basically do everything that you did in there, but it just will act as a layer above, and you can clip it and everything. It's really good. It's really good for gradient map. You have your raster layer, vector layer, gradient layer, fill layer, tone layer, frame border folder, and 3D layer. Each one has to do with a different thing. Most of the time you'll probably be using raster layer, but if you're a vector artist, vector layer might be for you. Gradient is just a gradient. Pretty simple. A fill is like paper. So it'd be like what you start with on a canvas. Tone will give you a pattern or dots, and you can change the shape, size, frequency, density. Pretty good. frame border folder and 3D layer. I don't really touch these, but you can import 3D assets onto your canvas directly. I remember touching it early on before. You can do like full scenes. You can draw over those. But again, you might need to beef your computer, possibly. Just saying. You have your layer masks, rulers and frames, file objects, layer settings, selection from Lapse layer. A lot of this stuff it's in here as well if you right click. And if you do like a selection window, you also get a little bar for all of these as well, which I think is very intuitive and very nice. We go on view. You can do the same thing with a navigation window in here as well. Here's print size, and so you can see at what it would actually look like printed, which is really good for big projects, like a certain poster project we're working on. I'm recording. Make sure to look at it, because you'll realize how big text is. You really will. Anyways, you can also, in the viewer, you can turn on your grid and your ruler. The really cool thing about Clip Studio Paint with the ruler is the way you do it is you hold click on the part where the ruler is, and boom, there's your ruler. It's on its own layer, and your pencil will connect with the lines of it, but your objects can also connect to it. Now, if you want the ruler to be more accurate, you would need to scroll really far in. You go to about 3200%, and then you put the line there. But now you basically have a pixel perfect line of measurement. Pretty cool. I use it for framing things for sure. It works really good for that. And if you want to turn off grid, you can do it there. You can also change what the grid looks like, what is its unit of measurement, that kind of things. Filters. This is kind of like a mini Photoshop kind of thing. So you have blur, blur strong, Gaussian blur. Gaussian blur is like blur, but you can choose the amount. Motion blur, you can choose directions. You can choose both directions. Radial blur, rotating. Smoothing, same thing as the tool in the other section, but it's just, I think, one version. You don't really get to choose. You can adjust your line width. This is really good for, at least for me, I like using it to outline things. You can remove dust, and it does itself black and white. I don't really use it because it's not me not using it for like photos. Distortion. You got curved surface, fisheye lens, pinch, polar coordinates, ripple, twirl, wave, and zigzag. Playing with the effects, I would say, is a good thing. You can make some very interesting patterns depending on the ones, like ripple or twirl. So look into it if you want to do it for like patterns. If you're trying to make something more form to an object, I would say use the mesh transform on the sidebar and just put up the amount so that it would curve exactly how you want it. There are effects. Mosaic is basically pixelization. You can remove JPEG noise, and artistic is basically it interprets an image and will make it look like a painting. And you can do it based off color, line, or both. Results will vary. It's very much an automated thing, and it will look ugly if you don't do the settings right. It'll look bulky, so be careful. There's a noise filter. I don't really use noise anymore. I used to use it a lot, but Honestly, you can probably get away with not using noise unless you are trying to really set a mood, I would say. And then there's sharpen. You sharpen, sharpen more, and unsharp mask. It's pretty good, I'd say. Sharpen is really good for when you're exporting, I'd say. And then you have your window. Window is basically where you, like how we covered in the beginning, it's just for setting up how you view your layout and what things are going to be on the screen. You can disable things, and you can basically right click on something that you don't want to show up in here. You can hide them or show them. And it has conventional ways of coloring. So I usually use color wheel, but in here you can do things like this. You can download color sets from the asset store. I'm fairly certain that there are some like Pantone related sets on there that people have made, or stuff like skin color or color wheel, that kind of thing. There is the good old bar way of making color if you really want to be a sadist about it. There's also this one where you choose the colors in the corners, which you can do here basically, but hey, this is a little bit more gridded. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know how this one works. I really don't. I would guess it has to do with the values and the percents. I don't know. And I'm pretty sure this last one is every color that you've used prior. It's basically recording every color that you've used since the previous time. Yeah, it's very interesting. I haven't looked at this in a while, and you can kind of see, you're basically seeing all the colors I've ever used probably with the program. It's pretty neat. Or it could just be a random rainbow. I don't know exactly. I just stick with this. But for other people, you might want to use something else. All right. So, let's actually do a bit of drawing. And here's the cool part. You can put in a reference window. I do it this way, but you can have it any way you want it. Let's find a little picture to draw, right? We're just going to reference something really quick, just so I can show off how the different brushes behave. I'm not going to cover every brush, but I'm just going to cover the brushes that I think cover each section pretty much. Because this is a thing where you're going to pick and choose which brushes that you want to use, which ones you want to do. It's all up to you, basically. It's you can do a lot with the program and pick and choose what you want to use, how you want to display it. And I'm a person who doesn't really use keyboard shortcuts, so I like when stuff is on the screen. All right. So we got a bird head right here. This is gonna be a quick little drawing, and I'm gonna try drawing it with the brushes that come with it. As you can see, I have a lot of different pens. Just so you know, usually the pens that come with the program, they'll be in the language that you chose for the program. So, and then it'll be like the first ones. But if you import brushes in here, usually they'll be still the name of where it came from. So, because this is a primarily Japanese app, there is majority Japanese brushes. But you can. What's great about the asset store though is it translates them for you, and you could copy paste the name And if you go to settings, you can rename it, and you can even change the icons of it. Win-win, I'd say. So, first off, we have India ink. It's a bit husky. And depending on the pen you use, it's going to be a bit different. You definitely want to find the brush that works for you. Or for whatever the thing is that you're going to be drawing. For me, I am just kind of going off the app because I don't really use pen brushes. And this is just because I've developed a work that doesn't really need them. But of course, as long as you've had experience with it, you should be fine. If you haven't had experience with these brushes, try them out. Figure out how to use them because it is a learning curve kind of environment. If you don't learn how to use them, you're going to just think that they're bad. So just make sure you try them out on your own. Figure out the settings that you need them to actually get for them to work for what you want to work. Pretty simple. Okay, so little bird. Just going to put it in the corner. A little bit more small. And this also is a good point to remember that you can turn on auto saving of your work as you draw. It usually saves every 10 minutes. But it's not saving the file for you, it's saving it in case it crashes. Which is, it usually doesn't happen, I would say. It only crashes if you're overloading it with other background apps like Chrome tabs, Firefox tabs, Spotify, Adobe Suite programs. If you just use a program by itself, it should be fine. If you have a problem where your computer is taking up much more space with a file you're working on, the best course of practice is just, there's two ways you can do it. You just close the file you're working on and check in Task Manager if it's lowered the amount that it's taking from your computer. The second option is closing the program and the file the correct way, reopening it, and it will start off low again. And when you open the file again, it will be low too. I would say that one works a little bit more efficient than the just closing the file and then reopening it. And this also brings up another point of before I started, and you need to do this if you want to use the time-lapse feature. Before you do anything, you click record time-lapse. It will use a bit more CPU, and it tells you that. But what it's doing is it records every stroke. As you can see, it has been recording every stroke I have made so far in the drawing section. Would you look at that? It's a pretty bird. Isn't that great? Anyways, and you can export what you've made, which I didn't mean to do, but you can. Look at that. And it saves it as an MP4, which is very reliable, I would say. Next, the G Pen. Who doesn't love a good G Pen, right? I'm going to try to mimic it. Drawing down doing here a little bit, but not exactly. I would say the G pen a little bit harder to work with. A lot thinner, even if you do it at a large size. You kind of have to be careful with it, like any tool. I would say the biggest tip with using pens is checking your pen pressure outside of the app, because you don't want to have too much pressure. I would say you shouldn't be putting more pressure than if you were using like a pencil, like a number 2 pencil, not like a drawing pencil, like a number 2 pencil. You do not want to have to put hard pressure to do things in this app. You'll scratch up your tablet. You'll just have a hard time. So make sure it's a very easy pressure based off your hand and based off like how you draw. Because again, the name of the game is drawing. And while I'm sizing it down, I can show you how the free transforms work. So I'm going to use the lasso. I'm going to go around, and I'm going to do this. Free transform. If you hold shift in normal scale, it will size it down without turning it. If you don't have it on, it'll be based off this. If you do free transform, it's based off your corners, which changes how this looks. If you hold shift this way, it will straighten out the lines with how you're working it based off. So it's up and down, and when you get to this part, it will go left and right. So if you want it to be a little bit more like to a building kind of thing, I would recommend doing it this way. And while you're in transform, you can undo what you've done. You can size it down. And boom, see? Now we have another fancy little bird head. Isn't that great? I'm just going to save really quick just because I'm a frequent saver. I think saving is good. Next up is marker. Milk pens, felt pens, marker pens. This one, I'd say it's probably for people who like that line work. So definitely the big thing about this is because of how the settings are, it's not really using pen pressure in the same way. It won't tilt, it won't curve unless you mess with the settings. So this is really good for people who want very consistent line work, I would say. So if you want your line work to not have any variation in its line, this could be for like a VTuber model, something that's a little bit more anime inspired. Definitely take a look at something where the pen doesn't alter. If you really want variation, though, I would stick with regular pen. And as you can see, just a simple bird. Again, I don't use pens that much just because it's not how I perform as an artist, but I would say that definitely good. Pens are pretty good. I've seen some very good pen work done in Clip Studio, especially for people who are showing off like their assets, which if you're wanting some advertising info for the app, people will use something on here pretty much if you have just a really good illustration to show off using it, which is just a good thing to do with showing off stuff in general with this. If you go to the asset store, which the assets is built into the secondary app of the program. So it's like this is the drawing app, and then you have a secondary app which gives you all access to other services. You just go in there, and that's basically it. You download them from there, and they'll automatically install in here if you download it. You can even set favorites inside the program if it's something you're going to come back to. One tool, very simple, it's the Airbrush. They have a hard and soft. Soft, you can change how sharp it is. It's good for airbrushing. So the more pressure I put, the blurrier it gets. But as long as I keep it thin, with like light pressure, I can do intricate line work. I more use the soft airbrush for things that I want to fill in, like a gradient. But you can definitely do stuff with it if you wanted to make something that was a little bit more airy, for sure. Again, so like say you want like, yeah. And you can also set layer effects to the brushes that you're using. You can set the blending mode. Definitely think about what you're going to be putting on, because it will change how the brush comes out of your pen, and it might not show up on the canvas, which is why you should maybe think about using the layer blending modes more than using the brush blending modes, because then you can set a layer to do the thing that you want instead, which I think results in more creative ideas to do your work, personally. And then we're going to shrink. Don't really care about too much warp. It's a very simple illustration. I just deleted it by accident, but you can just undo in the selection mode. Very nice. Ooh, look at all these talking heads. Well, they're not really talking, but you get what I mean, hopefully. Okay, pencil brush. I have a very specific pencil set that I will recommend that is much better than all of the pencils here, to me personally. I will say the real pencil that they have is fairly good. It's not the greatest, but it's also not bad. I would say it's just a little bit more of a texture on like a round brush kind of thing. So as you can see, you have to put in a little bit more effort too to get it to do what you want. But definitely if you want something that's a little bit more pencil-like, a little bit rougher, it's definitely something you could look into. The pencil brush that I'm going to recommend, though, it's so good. I would always recommend it. It's very good, just very, very good. Because it actually works better than this one, based solely on a technical like purpose. Because this just works like a normal pen kind of thing. It's more based off the texture that's in the app. But the other one actually is based on how you use your pressure, which is very much more similar to how you'd actually use a pencil. And I'm going to see. I could probably get all of the heads in a row by 5, so I'll actually increase the size of this head. Okay, we've covered that pencil. The other thing that is within this section is pastels. I don't really use pastels personally in here, but they work pretty similar in, I would say, to a pencil. Very much based off of the. As you can see, it's very cloudy. It kind of uses the process of much more similar to the pencil that I'm going to recommend, where it's based off your pressure. So, as you can see, it's light, more spread out. But if you put pressure, it darkens up right away. Probably some fairly good ones to try out. As you can see, it's very much big, but it has a very good texture to it if you wanted to do some kind of overlay to make something feel a little bit more painterly. That could be a good way to actually incorporate what's done by the app. I would say it definitely makes your work more interesting to have some kind of texture, because that is one of the hardest things to do with digital painting is make it feel like a painting. Because of course you can make digital artwork, but like if it doesn't look great, it's not really much of a digital painting in the same way. As you can see, a little bit sharper if you bring down the size. So it might be good to, if you're using pastels, you want sharper lines, go in with a smaller brush size. All right. Favorite section, the painting brushes. Hands down, I think the smooth watercolor brush is the best brush for painting anything that is smooth, for sure. It very much works like a gouache. You need to put pressure down to make it show up. And it has brush blending to it when you use it. And I would say the best technique with this brush, if you want to just lay down some smooth color wherever you're working, just turn off the color stretching. This will make it so that when you're using it, it will pretty much barely move paint. It still will move it somewhat, but not enough where it would cause damage to what you're painting. Definitely not like an oil brush where it will pull everything and everything. Like it'll ruin work. I've tried to use oil brushes in like digital, but it just will do that, and I don't know how to work with it. Definitely is very good for smooth blending. And this is even with it off of the color stretch. It works very good. And of course, I'm drawing the head small, so it's not going to be as detailed. But you can very much see what the possibilities are if you use it like this. This is probably a brush that would be good for, if I had to describe it, it's like smooth, like anime work. Like when I see a lot of Japanese artists and I see the shading that they do for their characters, a lot of the time it's this very nice, like almost airbrush painted effect with very nice line work. I think you can get the same effect if you use like the watercolor brush and you use it on different layers of the character using like multiply, overlay. You probably get something that's fairly close, I would say. I'm gonna shrink this face so I can do some more work, and I'll even put back on. You don't want to put the color stretch over 80. How's it going? As you can see, if you go over a spot, I think this is what makes it the best for doing digital fur. So if I just fill up how he looks, make him have a head, even though this bird that I'm drawing is a harpy eagle, one of the most dangerous hawks. I think they definitely have the biggest claws. Their claws are about the size of a bear's. That's usually the comparison. So don't do stupid things with these birds. Anyways, I want to put down some stroke here. And I just like go back and forth very lightly. I'm not putting down any new paint, but I'm directing how the paint goes, which in turn is a very nice fur effect, I would say. So if you wanted to make something feel a little bit more furry and alive, I would do something similar where you are blocking in with something solid and you're getting the general blocking of shading down, and then you just kind of use this brush following the path and shape of what you're drawing. It works pretty. Gouache. There is a few gouache brushes in here, including oil paint. I'm going to say it right away. I think just the gouache brush on its own is pretty good. You don't need to do much with it. It's a lot rougher to use, but it also has a good texture blending effect. Very simple, very easy to use. I usually use gouache for filling in color, because it has a very unique way of blending things together, rougher on the start. And then if you use something like the watercolor brush, it very much will make something unique. In terms of tips with texture with it, I would just say think about how it's going to blend with the colors that you're going to put on, whether it's grayscale or black and white. If you make the brush a little bit bigger, it will pull a little bit more paint, which is really good to get the texture to come through when you are dragging colors. So I'm going to color in part of the beak here, kind of showing you what I mean by how it uses color. It's very rough. If you put enough pressure, it will start adding paint or pulling a bit of that paint in. You can get a good way with like coloring. Be careful though, because once you put a little bit too much pressure in one spot, you will stretch the paint. Definitely something to keep an eye on. I think you'd get tired of drawing bird head, but I'm gonna be honest. I don't really get tired of drawing bird heads. I think they're great. Who doesn't love a good bird? Am I right? Very simple. Nothing too big. I'm not really using it the way exactly that I'd use it because I'm using it to make outlines. It takes a lot longer to paint something than to just do a simple line art of it. So don't push back too hard, I would say, in that regard. I'm definitely explain interesting stuff for sure. All right. If these next two are just paintbrushes, if I remember correctly, I think some of these brushes are just some of mine. Yeah, pretty much. There's some realistic watercolor brushes that you can find on Clip Studio Assets that are fairly good if you're looking to. This could be a good. Ooh, why don't I show this part? I'm going to show you how to import Photoshop brushes. So basically, what you want to do is you're going to go to basically where you want to put them. You want to import material, right? But you don't do it through the app. What you want to do is you want to import a subtool. Now, if you go to your subtool and you find the brushes that you want to import, it's actually easy. It'll import them pretty much exactly how they would be in Photoshop, which I have found to be very interesting because Photoshop brushes have very much different pressuring and sizing. You kind of have to be finicky with them. Like the texture. This is a weird thing. The brush size. The brush size doesn't really start showing until you get it to a little bit. And they're also, I've noticed, they sometimes can be a bit slower to work with, personally. As you can see, I imported a pastel brush set. And I would say it, without any real changes to the settings, it seems to work pretty good. Again, this is something that because of course I know people have their own favorite brush sets that they, bought on Gum. Any kind of app like that. So you kind of have to figure out, okay, how am I going to get it in? But now it's very simple. So it's more just figuring out what you want your settings to be, pretty much. This is me just kind of testing it out. I would definitely say to worry about Photoshop brushes. So when you put them in, because you don't know exactly how they're going to perform. Like this brush, I don't know exactly what it's doing. I'm pretty sure that is how it's supposed to react in Photoshop too, but you have to have how to use brushes in here as well. So be careful. Also, I mean, I don't know if it's a problem with Studio because I get to face it, but make sure what you're downloading is legit. Don't download a virus. You can go to the asset store and find usually the best stuff. There are people who sell packs of brushes, but I would make sure they're from established artists because you don't want to get a virus. I don't know why some of them don't put them on that store. I think a lot of the time it has to do with the strictness of the materials you use when you make something. So I would just say if you're going to make something, definitely don't try to use the materials that you've made. They have a very big thing where they will take down a material because of you using even just a text in your brush. So be careful with that. So we have 9 heads right here. And this pretty much covers most of the tools. I would say, okay, I have some more ones in here, but they're for specific things. I have some downloaded cloud brushes. This one, this is more of it's very random what you'll have in here, but it's basically effects. So, say you want glitter or stars or anything of that sort. This is a very interesting section. So, say I want like an X. Boom, it's an X brush. I can even make it follow the line of what I'm doing. And you can change the sizing. So I'll just put some X's, right? You can also include stuff like regular patterns. Like this is a material I downloaded that is like a TV screen. And as you can see, it's depending on the size of the brush and the detail, it can take a bit of time for it to catch up, but it does not lag, really, I would say. It's very good at not lagging. And of course, this is more just finding a brush that works for you, personally. Because there are many different effects that you can bring in, especially photo effects or gradients. Like, look at that, it's a circle. And you also have to be careful with how it displays. Like, look at this. And as you can see, it tries to keep everything fairly equal with your pattern. So That's something you don't necessarily have to worry about. There's blending brushes as well if you want to do it the hard way. They have the general blend, blur, fingertip, which is very similar to the watercolor brush, but I find the watercolor brush more effective because it's more messing with the paint in a natural. Not like you're actually using a brush. You have your eraser. Pretty simple. There's a soft and a hard eraser. There's rough. There's a vector eraser. Snap layers. Hand tool. Moves the canvas. Operation tools. This moves objects and also has to do with timelines and 3D objects. Move layer. This moves the stuff in the layer. Pretty neat. Selection. Magic wand. Works pretty well, I would say. Something could be used for line work. Eyedropper, paint bucket. There's different ways the paint can fill. You can enclose and fill for other layers. For only the layer you're working with, which is like the editing layer. For me, I have these. These basically are fill tools, and what they do is, say you have a cube, which I can make right here, which because there's a shape tool too. I'll set it to equal. Basically, what I can do is I can go on another layer. And I can set this as a reference layer, but I don't need to because it's a very intuitive tool. As you can see, nothing happened, right? Well, actually, it's a tool that goes on the line of what you made. And basically, if you surround the entire tool, then you get things happen. And they also have an erase tool, which will erase where the line isn't. I can also go back and undo it. The icons kind of look like cupcakes, I guess is how you would say it. Like, I think they're actually supposed to be cupcakes. And so I'm just gonna keep doing that. Gradients. Pretty simple. You have the simple settings with it. You can also make different gradients. These gradients can be also used in gradient maps, which I will show on a more finished illustration below. Freeform Gradient. It's I think from what I understand, it messes with how it comes out if you press the paint layer. Yeah. I don't think it's needed, personally. I think there's tools that kind of work. Freeform gradients work. Creating frames and cut frame borders. These have to do with comics. There are rulers. There's perspective ruler as well. Text. You can't do all the things that you do in InDesign with your text, but you can do basic stuff. Either way, you can use all the fonts that are installed on your computer, which is pretty nice. Balloons for text for comics, and correcting lines. From what I understand, correcting lines more has to do with vector. work. So if you're making something with that, might be a cool thing to invest in. Okay, so the last thing that I'm going to try to do is I'm going to illustrate a new picture of the same bird, right? But I'm going to do it in a more finished, because I want to show off the type of techniques that you can do to finish an in the app. So I'm going to go with this one. Got a broken beak, but not a big deal. You can basically remake it where you want it to be. So for me, this is the ultimate. It's very, very good. It's called Yoda. If I go into the downloads to my favorites, it looks a bit something like this. That's what the icon for this is, to get the pencil material that you can put in your canvas, which you just drop it in like this. And then basically everything now in here has a pencil pattern over it, which makes it feel a little bit more natural. It's also not as bad as noise in terms of file size. And yeah, you can just import something like that in. I also have a perspective tool. These two combine together, and you basically have a cube that goes in perspective on a point perspective grid. Though actually, I would say it probably is just an all perspective grid, because you can basically make things like 3-point. So let's save the work, and I will show you my process of just a quick illustration. This pencil, again, it's really good because it actually works like a regular pencil, how you would think it would work in real life. So when you put no pressure, it more acts like a wash. But if you put a little more pressure, which this actually feels like a pencil because you're actually not putting that much pressure to get it to sharpen. But again, it's very, very good at mimicking what you're actually supposed to get from a pencil. So for me, when I do a pencil illustration, I like to add in the value. And if I turn it into a painting, basically I can just kind of like paint over it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show the gradient map process with this one, just so you can get an idea of what goes on when you want to gradient map a piece of artwork, because gradient mapping is a good way to quicken the coloring time of your drawing process, I would say. Going to darken the beak, add some a little bit of texture here. This is very good for if you want to figure out where feathers are. In terms of doing a bird, as you can see, I'm really slowing down in terms of the process while still going fairly quick. Because it's not that difficult once you actually use the app for a good amount of time and then get your process in there and you know what you need to do. And again, I'm going to try to make it a little bit quicker than what I usually do, but this isn't too far off in terms of what I'm doing with pencil work for like a class, or if I just want to sketch something like free time kind of stuff. You know, I've been talking for over an hour now. Doesn't help that I kind of started off with a dry throat, and I'm in an apartment that has dry air. But you know, I've made it pretty much to where you could basically go off of the video if you wanted to. You don't need to necessarily stay and watch me draw the bird. But if you are interested in my process with it, then I'd say take a look. It's definitely not as conventional. It definitely isn't as quick as some people because I don't use shortcuts. It's just something that I never really learned. Well, it's not like I didn't learn to do it, but I just didn't see the value in it because, like, I kind of already go quick as an illustrator. So I didn't think I needed to really learn the commands. Maybe it'll become a disadvantage later. Maybe it will never will, to be honest. 'Cause, like, the funny thing is, even with commands, I've figured out how to quicken my process. So I don't know. I guess you'd have to ask a teacher about it or a professor. Like, is it really more important to learn the commands, or is it more just learning about how to draw? I don't know what they'd say, but they'd probably say that in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. Yeah, probably. Because I know, I mean, I think all of the people in this video, like watching it, which will likely be people from my school. Hello. You've had Andy. He is the messiest painter and professor that we know. He's very much an on the fly person with what he's doing with his work, but it's very much his style. I doubt he'd be the kind of person to use shortcuts because he loves to rework his ideas on the fly. And that might be why it's different for person to person, because it probably is a majority to do with the process. So as you can see, not only more accurate, but I think I'm liking it a bit more personally. Okay. It's a crazy concept, liking what you make. I definitely know some people who feel like they don't make good work. And I'm just kind of like, what? Crazy. You make fabulous. Don't say the crazy things that you're saying. Stop it. Get some help. But sometimes it's just, people don't realize how good it is at what they're doing. Wish people would be more noticeable with that. Like, personally, I know, and it's not like a bragging thing for sure. I definitely know that I'm much better at illustrating animals than I am illustrating something like people. Um, Sometimes I don't hear it as often, but it's something that I shouldn't need to hear because it's something people should expect from me. Like, oh, Benny, you drew a good-looking animal. Good job. You do the thing that you already do. So it's very nice sometimes to hear that I'm doing good with things that I don't have as much experience with. Like people. I know the one thing with the person is people aren't as it's part of that like evolutionary factor of like people know when something is off with a human face, then they would know what's off with like a dog. Because like a dog, there's so many variations of dogs. You never can really know if it's wrong per se. There's definitely a general blueprint though for what dogs look like. Most of them have a jowl like thing. Depending on how they have the mouth though, like they might be a slobber kind of dog, or they might have a no slobber. Might be more like a pit bull. They more might be like a beagle or a bloodhound. That changes how you approach the animal. That approaches how they open their mouth. That's how, and the same thing goes with animals. But people are a very similar structure through and through. Not much variation, which also to me makes them a little bit more boring to draw. People are a little bit boring to me. It's not like I can't draw a person, but it's like, um, what am I gonna make, um, without it ending up just looking like a fancy photo, you know? Because like people do professional photography, and that's generally its own art form for sure. Some people say that thing of like, oh well, I could just take a photo, and then that's it. That's all I need to do. To a degree, I can kind of see in certain circumstances where that's coming from because um I know sometimes it's the process that is what makes an art piece important. But if you don't know the process, sometimes it's gonna look like, oh, they drew like a realistic soda can or a realistic bottle. Oh, that person is like pixel perfect to like a photo that's based it off of. And of course, it's time consuming, but is it really skillful as something that is like hand drawn, more artistic, that kind of thing? So I'd say have fun with it. Hey, you could just follow along with the video, turn this into a Bob Ross kind of situation where you're just kind of like following along to what I'm drawing. I think I'm just going to quickly add an outline. around everything that is solid for the next part. But this will show, and this will kind of be the last thing before I end the video, how quickly you can do the painting process if you use something like gradient maps. The big thing, just make sure you have a good outline, and you will, again, you're gonna grab the tool that is used for coloring. The best way to figure out if your lines are working is to pick a bright color and fill it in. And you see, notice how the eyes are white? You might remember that I said you could use convert to brightness to opacity. Boom. There you go. You don't have to deal with it anymore. Now for me, I usually use the correct line, and I will, instead of thickening, I will narrow about halfway or so. And then if you really want to make sure it's bright, you can also gouache and blur it so that it's soft on the edges. And boom, we have a fill. We can turn it pure white. Now what I like to do, and this is a new thing that I've been doing with illustrations, is I will clip this to the layer below. I will set to multiply, and then I will gouache and blur it to a high degree. And then I will add it. And what I can do this. So as you can see, I'm gonna set it to multiply, and I will set it to around 85. Keeps it very dark, but doesn't take away from the illustration. Now, correction layer, gradient map. This is a very fun part for me. So I clip it to the color layer below, and basically with gradient maps, you are picking values that start from dark to light. So with this bird, as you can see, the majority of this gradient map is silver, right? And really to only get the drawings to show up, what you need to do, and look, you can see, saving the recovery information, or it might not show up on the screen. Great if it shows in OBS or not. Save the recovery information. That's pretty good. I don't have to worry about it. I saved it now. That's pretty good. And I can use my tone curve if I want to make the other color show up a bit more. You want to be careful with gradient maps because of depending on the size, it might not show up correctly. So I did that. I'm going to use Add Glow, and I'm going to basically, I'm going to add color to the eyes. But I'm going to do it in a way that makes them glow. That's pretty nice. And then I will add another clipping layer. And I'm going to put a multiply layer of like a purplish blue over the beak. use white on it and get like a reflection going on. And we're almost done. And then we're going to add some of that multiply to the top of the face right here. And we're going to add it to the feathers to the back. And as you can see, we have a good head right there. And that's this is another thing. If you're gonna save layers to below, you definitely want to do it from the bottom going up, just so that things will save properly over one another. That should be everything that I can think of with what I'd want to explain to someone who wants to get into Clip Studio Paint. Again, the biggest friend I would say for Clip Studio Paint is the amount of assets that you can find on the asset store. Majority, like 95% of the assets on the store are free. We're talking 3D poses because there's also a 3D model that you can use for drawing if you want it to be a little bit more accurate. There's material sets, brush sets, gradient map sets, individual items, layouts. You can also save how your desktop looks and publish it on there, and that's how it play in here. The sky is the limit of what you can do. So I hope this helped explain the software a bit, and I hope that you managed to get something out of this. So I'll see you guys in either class or whatever video you get recommended to watch next. All right, take care.